Welcome to the Ventures and Visionaries episode 1. We are here with Lauren Colana, and we would like to discuss the ideas of vision and leadership for new companies and companies that are getting started, as well as financial companies as they grow and continue to evolve their story. Lauren served as the creative director, designed and produced a wide range of award-winning corporate communication products for top-tier financial services, institutions, and real estate firms. She's been working for more than 22 years, overseeing a team that specializes in the development of branding, marketing, and online communication solutions. Before that, she served as vice president of business development and director of creative solutions, client solutions at Synergy Graphics. She also worked prior to that as an art director and strategic roles and art director at Morgan Stanley, Prudential, and Lord Abbett. Welcome, Lauren.
How are you today? Mordy. I appreciate you having me today, and I'm excited for our conversation.
I am so excited. It's the first of our podcast series, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot about you and how you approach vision and how you approach marketing and how you look to empower your clients to be more successful. This to me is a series about stories, journey, learning, and wisdom. So I look forward to hearing from you on how your journey went. Maybe give us a few moments on how you got into where you got into.
Sure, absolutely. I would love to do that. So I started my career by education as a data visualization specialist. And what that is taking very complex information like data and levels of different types of information and creating visual infographics and data visualization to communicate that data or information in a more succinct manner through creative visuals. And so organically, that lends itself to be a very intentional sweet spot in financial services, as where data is king. They always say content and data are king. And it's really easy to understand when you see a very complex spreadsheet of numbers and then you see a beautiful chart, why it's an art form, right? Is to take that very complex data and dial it down into something that's very easily digestible. So I started my education off as a data visualization specialist, and so wound up getting into financial services organically as a designer based on that background. So my career path led me, like you had mentioned earlier, Lord Abbett, Prudential, Morgan Stanley, and then wound up migrating over into the alternative asset management space of where we support, hedge funds, private equity, real estate, venture capital, and wealth managers, because organically, when they communicate, a fair amount of their information is data driven. But our firm now obviously spans across marketing, communication, web, digital marketing, obviously as an expansion, but that's kind of how my evolution was into the space. And it's very interesting because they say it takes 10,000 hours. I think Malcolm Gladwell said 10,000 hours to become an industry expert at something, where it says it's like it breaks down to like 2.6 years if you spend 80 hours a week. And people are like, well, I'm not working 80 hours a week. And I say, well, I jest on that. And I can't challenge you as an entrepreneur. You're certainly spending 80 hours a week thinking, breathing, living when you start your business. So 15 years ago, after my stint at those very, very unbelievable financial institutions, I said to myself, there's an opportunity here for me to start an organization solely focused on alternative asset management, which was, there really weren't any marketing, communication, design firms focused just on that space. And so it's a very niche space. It's when you bucket financial services as a whole, it's a very small slice of it because there's a lot of different companies that encompass financial services. But alternative asset management has a specific voice, a specific audience, client base, investor base. And so to be successful in alternative asset management, I felt like we had to become industry experts in it and maintain a focus on it holistically, as opposed to
before we get into what you're doing today, maybe let's speak a little bit about how you got to making the decision to move into doing your own firm, how you crafted your vision for picking these specific industries, and once you did that, how do you inspire your team to speak from the same voice? As a marketer, I'd imagine that's something that keeps you awake quite a bit.
Yes. So I think, when you are thinking about starting a business, there's certain things that you have to do. You have to believe in yourself, right? Be passionate about what you do, be open to new ideas, think outside the box. You have to be proactive, not reactive. And you have to be, most importantly, willing to take risks, right? And I think one of my favorite metaphors is the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician. I don't know, Morty, if you've had that, a little bit about that, but yes, exactly. Exactly. And so for us, for me, I really felt like there was an underserved area of our market, right? So I think it was identifying that there was a problem to be solved, right? And so I think every good entrepreneur sees a problem or wants to create a solution, right? To serve a problem for an industry or a market. So I said to myself, well, I really feel like I could build a company that solves a problem or creates solutions, right, for an industry. And so where the entrepreneur, back to risks, right? The entrepreneur has the vision and they take the risks for developing these new solutions and these new services. And then they successfully bring those solutions and services into the marketplace, right? The
or
manager
not.
runs part of the business and the technician masters the craft. But as an entrepreneur, you start off doing all three, but really balance is the key. You can't do all three without balance. And balance is more of a virtue, more than a virtue. It's like a whole venture, right? But that's kind of like, if I want to inspire others on the entrepreneurial path, it's to, want to, take a risk and you see an opportunity to create a solution for a specific audience or market.
So in your case, you saw it in financial services and you built a firm around that particular solution.
Correct.
Maybe
Correct.
maybe
And
a
there was a
little
big
bit
gap.
more about tell me a little bit more about that process.
Sure, absolutely. So I think when you start a business, there's a few things that you need to do. You have to sit down and you have to say, okay, I have to identify the problem and validate the solution, right? Then you have to develop a business plan, right? That's really important. You have to secure some funding, whether it's personally or outside. Then you have to build a team. And this is very specific, Morty, because some people build a big team and then hope for the clients to come. I think that's the wrong mindset. I think you have to build a right sized team and then, market your services and weigh, your client base and your volume and then staff to that accordingly. Right. And sometimes that's painful because you have to spend a lot of time as the entrepreneur hiring and training and having an arsenal of people that might be available to be onboarded at some point. So you're always kind of recruiting, soft recruiting, but that's, to me, was very important, is building the team and right sizing it, because I think a lot of businesses fail when they do the opposite, is where they overstaff and then hope for the clients to come. And I think it's right sizing, and that's very strategic. And then you have to launch and iterate and it's always an evolution. I say marketing is always an evolution, but owning a business is always an evolution. Your business evolves all the time and constantly. So you have to be nimble enough to say, this didn't work, I'm going to make a change. Or this is working, I'm going to build upon that. And sometimes you fail and you have to you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because there's going to be times where things are going to fail. And the most important lesson as an entrepreneur you take, or as a business owner, is you have to learn from those mistakes and just, embrace them. They're not negatives. They actually make you stronger because you learn from them exponentially. So I think that's a big, when launching a business, it's important to know that it's going to be risky and very rewarding, and you're going to take risks and you're going to fail, but you have to learn from the failures.
For sure. And
Mhm.
maybe for a moment, speak to me for a moment a little bit about the idea of helping your team understand that failure is part of the process and failing forward is a value. At least in my experience, that always is a challenge.
Oh, yeah, very much so. So I had an example recently where we had worked for a client for many years. I personally worked for them as an advisor, and then also they were a client of ours at our company. And they wound up hiring a new head of marketing internally, right? Because that's what companies do as they evolve, and I encourage them to do it. And the head of the marketing was based in Italy. And so he wanted to move sort of, the website work and some of the creative work to Italy. So it's local for him, as opposed to not being, he could meet with them, he could engage with them personally. And my team was really disappointed that the client was moving some of the work. And I said to them, no, you have to think about it a completely different way. For 4 years, we worked in an extension of the alt space, in the RIA aggregator space, multifamily office aggregators. And I said, we learned it in a subset of our industry that we would have never learned. And it was almost like education by fire. We had to go in and we had to learn a lot in a short period of time. And we built a company from 1.8 billion to 20 billion in the 2.5, 3 years that we were collectively involved, my team and myself. And I said, wow, you have to look at the positives on how we helped create change within that organization, helped build their brand and create brand awareness so that they were able to go from 1.8 to 20 billion. And what we learned personally was exponential, because now we can pay that forward to other clients. And we have another segment of clients in the alt space that we never had before. And so I always say to my team, you'll always have to look at the glass half full, not the glass half empty. Look at what you gained and the knowledge that you gleaned from an experience versus what maybe was the ultimate outcome might be, negative and positive. But don't focus on the negatives. You have to focus on what you learned from the experience. And then you can give that experience to the next client. And I said to my team, do you realize we have a whole other segment of business now that we're open to? And we have experience from just those few years. And so it changed the mindset of a couple of team members who were on the disappointed side. So if that case study helps, hopefully it does.
I think it does. And I would ask to what you seem to be suggesting is that not only for internal team members who are going through difficult times, and everybody has difficult times, but also young people who are potentially entering the workforce should think differently about potential setbacks.
Absolutely. I also am a product of things happen for a reason. Of course, I don't want to be, spiritual. Obviously, hard work goes into everything and experience. But, sometimes I say to the young people, I do mentor some young people coming out of college and trying to understand what path of marketing they want to take, right? Financial services is just one of many paths you can take within marketing. And then digital marketing versus traditional marketing are two completely different paths. But I often encourage young people to understand that if you have a role and that role ends and you're disappointed by it, that's because that path, that end of that is going to take you on a different path, right? And that path is going to lead to something more exciting and different. And if you never had either, you didn't have it end to an agree, job, or you had a change of, career paths or roles, or even companies. Sometimes these, kids come in and they have a 2-year engagement, and then, the team changes and they get the downsize, and they get, removed from the team, or they're no longer at the firm. And you have to look at it as an opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to take what I learned, I'm going to apply it, and I'm going to go get my next, career opportunity. And that one's going to lead me to the next one. And that one's going to lead me to the next one. And I had to learn that, through my 20s and early 30s. Before I started the firm, I spent time at 3 very significant different investment institutions, of which I learned something very, very different from each. And it was important for me, as I look back, to see that there weren't, when I left one, that wasn't like, that's a bummer. It was, oh my God, that was an opportunity. Because then I wound up being at someplace else that I learned a whole other set of skills. And I was able to, interact with different people and learn from others, as opposed to being in one place, and not having the opportunity. So I think that young people have to understand that growth is a process and growth is a path, and you might have go down different roads, but each road, leads you to somewhere special, and you learn and you grow.
And it almost sounds like what you're saying is that even though people wouldn't necessarily think that way, the purpose of the journey is in fact the journey.
Yes. Oh, very well said, Mordy. Very well said. Yes, it is the journey, right? Without a journey, I don't think there's any learning, right? You have to actually be open. And you're absolutely correct on, it is a journey. It's still a journey today for myself. Like, every day is a journey. So
And
I feel like
learning,
almost every day, or at least not, maybe not every day, but at least something specific and very significant every couple of days.
and how does one prepare oneself to being more open to the journey? Because again, I think you and I have a very similar background in terms of, the fractional capacity, owners of business, and so on. We have a group of team members that we work with. We obviously work with many clients. How does one prepare oneself to allow for the opportunity to be embraced as an opportunity, rather than being resistant of an opportunity as being a threat against whatever it is that. In other words, how would you coach young people who are coming out and saying, I'm so concerned, the world is a crazy place, and everything is changing, and what do I do?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question. A lot of young, I think, individuals feel like there's information overload. So we start there, right? Okay, I majored in something, but is that even what I want to do? And even within that, there's 10 different segments I can go into. So they're just like overwhelmed, if I can, that's probably the word I'm looking
Yeah.
for. And I say to a lot of young people, first of all, don't be overwhelmed, but you have to first of all, focus on the task at hand and the job at hand at that time, right? You can always pivot and you can evolve. I think that a lot of young people want to become industry experts day one, right? I want to know everything. I want to have a senior level job. And you can't. It's an evolution. You have to learn and grow. I go back to that, 10,000 hours. If you're
Yeah.
not spending 80 hours a week, you're spending 40, and that takes 9 years. So think about that. 40 hours a week, 46 hours a week, more or less. That's about 9 years, right? So
Mhm.
that's your 20s. You're learning to become an industry expert. There's very few portfolio managers out there or CEOs that are 28. So they're rare, few and far between, but pretty much they don't exist. So you got to get used to, more work and maybe longer hours if you want to compress that down. You have to be patient because learning is an evolution, right? It takes, again, think about that time frame. Decide how to most effectively position yourself, right? So learn a little bit and say, okay, I want to position myself as this type of industry expert, or I want to position myself. And you have to think about that. It might not be the first 2 years out of school, but after year 3 or 4, how do you want to position yourself? I think that's very important. And again, try to become an industry expert at your target market or within the field that you're in, right? Again, that could take 9 years, and expect to do a lot of, there's a lot of success and failure in those first, I would say, 9, 10 years. So embrace it and learn from it and don't get discouraged by it, right? It's one
Yeah.
of those things. And I think patience is a virtue. I know that's an old saying, but I do find a lot of, kids out of school want to get to where they see, somebody who's 20 years older than them. They want to get there immediately. And you just can't. You have to really, take the time. And look, if you want to become an industry expert in 3 years, then spend 80 hours a week doing it, right? So, there's a give and take, right?
For sure. And also, there's a lot of videos and social media clips showing people earning millions and millions of dollars by doing weird things or funny things or developing a brand new, widget of sort. And people buy into that type of thinking. But without going so much into just the younger generation, maybe we can pivot now to you had mentioned that you are also a fractional leader for companies.
Mhm. Yes,
And
absolutely. So, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to just say, obviously, we have many similar approaches because I do a similar type of role. My side is technology, your side is marketing. How did you recognize that becoming a fractional leader was A, needed in the marketplace, and B, was something that you wanted to embrace?
It's great. And Morty, I know you do the same, and it's so impressive as well. So I realized that I did a little bit of analytics and data analytics as a data visualization specialist. I love numbers. And so I realized that to have an effective marketing program, right, for a medium to small business, even a large business, a large asset management firm, a small asset management firm, the minimum amount of time somebody needs to spend on marketing a week is 12 hours. Okay. That's about, but
Really?
you could spend a little bit more,
Really?
but that's about it. So it's a strategy and planning 2 hours, content creation and creative work 4 hours, distribution 2 hours, client and prospect engagement 2 hours, and evaluation and analysis 2 hours. Without the data and analysis, you can't learn from it and evolve. And
Sure.
so I figured that, you don't have to hire somebody full time for 12 hours a week, right? And again, some marketing specialists, some companies do need full-time marketers, right? So we're not talking about, the Coca-Colas of the world, right? Or,
Sure.
the large investment firms, right? They have full teams, right? Of marketers, right? I'm talking about our clients who are our businesses. So, funds between, 50 million and, maybe 5 billion, wealth advisors that are managing between, 100 million and, maybe 10 billion, and alternative asset management firms, again, within like even 20, 30, 40, 50 million, to again up to like 5 billion. At 5 billion, you probably have full-time marketers on the team, but a lot of them are investor relations and business development specialists, which are not marketers, right? So a lot of times there's a confusion. Like if you're business development and sales or your investor relations, you're not a marketer. You're not a designer, a marketer, a content creator, right? And so I figured these 12 hours was the key. So at the 12 hours, you don't need a full-time person. You almost have somebody sitting around, right? Doing nothing or maybe multitasking, and that person's not a specialist. So they're not a writer. Well, they could be, but they're not a writer and a designer. They're not a designer and a strategist. They're not a strategist and, a distribution specialist, right? Those 12 hours are around 5 different people that you have to create. So then you would have 3, 4, 5 full-time people for 12 hours a week. So I realized that there was an amazing opportunity to become a fractional CMO. And as a fractional CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, and with my whole entire team behind me, I can create the strategy, the calendar, and the program, right? And do that strategy and planning. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of upfront work that goes into it's the first few weeks. But then once that happens, that strategy and planning is 2, 3 hours a week. Do that myself. And then the content creation and creative work, my team does 4 hours, distribution. My team does 2 hours, client prospect engagement, 2 hours, and evaluation analysis, 2 hours, right? So that's over three different people. And so you can't do that unless you do fractional work. And so for me, it was an organic way to offer an opportunity, a solution to my clients, because if not, they were having their admin or their IR or business development person doing it, and that person has their own job to do. And so I thought it was a really a way to solve a problem, create a solution in a space. And so, yeah, so if you use that metric, and I'm sure for yourself on the technology side, you probably have similar metrics of how many hours it takes a week once you onboard and create, strategies and solutions and create a calendar. But things that are maintenance driven or things that are specific to weekly, service driven needs. But the fractional work creates, opportunity for clients to have a better marketing program, a more tailored marketing and effective marketing strategy, and peace of mind that it's being executed. And then once a month, we do a very detailed analytical review. We go through metrics with our clients. We talk about what we're shifting in the strategy based on A/B testing. And, we go over key performance indicators, KPIs that we have, and how we're meeting those.
Of course. So, in our world, these meetings, these check-ins with the clients are generally driven outside of a proactive process that we'll implement to keep people out of trouble. Because we're engaged to a large degree in 2 parallel tracks. One is keeping the lights on, and the other one is initiatives for improvement and gaining other efficiencies, investments, and so on. I'm wondering if that works the same way in marketing, or is it totally different?
No, there's very much overlap there for sure. The creating efficiencies is huge, right? There's economies of scale, right? So you learn from something you're doing with another client, and then you're like, wow, I can roll that out to all of my clients, right? Especially if you're doing fractional work. When you're doing evaluation and analysis and you find something is being widely successful, whether it's a strategy or a type of program you're running, for marketing, you can actually say, I can adopt that for other clients. Other clients can adopt that strategy. Obviously, every client's different. So the content and the creative work you do is different, but the underlying, strategy you're using, the tactics, if you will, if you find them to be effective, you can roll them out to other clients. So there's a lot of economies of scale there. And so there's efficiencies to be created, especially with assisting clients. I say that every client I work with gleans the expertise that I've been able to have and glean and build from other clients, and learning from them over 15 years. 22 years in the business, but 15 in just alts. So it's an opportunity for clients to, when they have questions, I act, even for clients that come to me, I act as just an advisor. If they have questions around marketing or, changes within, the landscape, use of AI is an example, they can come to me and I can say, look, from what I've learned from working with other clients, this is what I would advise, or this is what I would suggest, or this is how we could work, more efficiently together. But there's definitely, like you said, there's efficiencies to be had.
You're mentioning a lot about interacting with clients and metrics and data analytics and being able to present results for clients. And that clearly goes directly into my next question, and that is around value and value creation. Do you view it strictly around the numbers, or is there anything else that you would consider in the value proposition that you offer to a client?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's to me, it's not just about numbers. Numbers are great. You can use numbers to help you evolve and be a better business owner and a better vendor for clients. But really, the metrics are way broader than that. When I have a client that comes back, 3, 4 times at a different company, that to me is very rewarding. It's a signal that it's something that's more, less tactical, but I understand that metric. It's a way that I can validate what I've done for them in the past if they're coming back for it again at a different company, or whether a company, they've been at some place for a very long time and they come back for additional services. That's a really important way, I think, for all of us, yourself as well, to say that we're adding value in an industry. Also to, obviously, referrals. When other, providers refer our business, sometimes it's hard to measure that. A client can come to you and they don't often tell you where they came from. You can ask, but if they don't, share the information, it's okay. You don't know. So it's hard to track that with data. You really can't. So you have to, when you build your relationships, and people refer business to you, it's a testament that you're doing something well, and always checking in and with those referral sources too, to make sure, you're delivering on your service. But it's definitely very, it's been very beneficial for us to be able to, and gratifying for us to be able to see clients happy with their end product, raising money with our solutions and services. And that's a key part of, why they come to us. They get in the room, we get them in the room and we get them in front of investors and clients. So I think it's very much a measurement tool, if that makes sense. And it's not, you can't, like I said, you can't slice and dice data with it. You can't say, well, X amount of people came from X. Sometimes you don't know.
Right. The value conversation is always something very interesting to me. And I heard years ago, Dan Sullivan, who's an entrepreneurial coach, speak about value creation as being the sum total of leadership, relationship, and creativity. And it sounds like those exactly are the three themes that you're speaking of. It sounds like you're talking about the relationships, because that's people come back, and you're talking about leadership, providing the vision, and you're talking about creativity. Well, that's in nature of your business.
Great. That's great. I actually hadn't heard that. So I love that. I'm going to use it. I'll footnote you, Marty, for
Dan Sullivan, not mine.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. Relationships are everything. We operate in a very relationship driven industry. And I believe that every relationship I've had over 15 years has led me to where I am today. And I will tell any client that it's so instrumental. It's actually paramount to anything else. Without the relationships, there is no business. And so it takes time to cultivate relationships. And sometimes you don't make money on relationships, and that's okay. I always say that to my team. If somebody calls and needs advice or advisory time, or they need a favor, or we want to take the time to say, okay, let's refine something, and maybe it's not something we can bill for, but it's something that's going to add a tremendous value to that client. We do that 100%, because you can't measure it with dollars, but the relationship is so much more important than a dollar sign, because without that, you don't have a business without the relationships. And I appreciate the creativity, because I think that we have to be creative with our output, right? Of course, every single output we do has to be specific and unique to each client and deliver on the needs they have, right? And serve a purpose for them specifically. Every client's different. So creativity is key, but you also have to be creative about, how you run and manage a business. It's not always a perfect science. Like, it's not McDonald's, right? It's not, a process where you just put, a hamburger together through an automated process. It's very much creative when you run a business. You have to evolve, shift, be a chameleon. And so, but you also, for us, our end product is creativity too. So it definitely is a huge part, but relationships are paramount. And obviously a team effort. I can't do what I do without my team. So you have to have a very, very committed and also, really talented team. And so I always say that 1 + 5 in this case equals 100 for us. We're a team of 30 people, and every single person is an absolutely brilliant add to the team. And without a team effort, we don't, this doesn't work. So it's definitely a team effort, making sure that as a leader, everybody's voice is heard and also that they're happy within their role. And if not, how do we tweak that to be, to make it so that they feel like they are adding value and they're creating success, right, for the client and also for themselves.
Sure. And we are both
If
in
you,
a services
you're,
business, and as such, the people essentially drive the success of our business. And you mentioned AI before. So I'd be really curious to hear a little bit more of your thoughts on what AI is or is not doing in the marketing space, and how is that changing or not changing some of the work that you are doing.
Yes. I think that, as it's evolving and it's evolved so quickly in the last, I think, 6 months, maybe even 9 months, for us, we're using it tactically in a few different ways. Look, it can't replace a human for what we do holistically because it can't create the types of visual engagement and also user experience that's tailored to a very specific client, right? If you're putting out widgets and the widgets are all the same and it's rinse, repeat, recycle, you can create something what's a systematic creativity wise. But when it has to be very customized for a client based on who they are and what they're looking to achieve. It has to be somewhat customized. That being said, there's a lot we are doing right now with research. Obviously, we have to fact check everything. But in the past, our writers had to do a lot more deep dive, really, reading a lot of white papers, finding the white papers, doing a lot of internet scrubs, internet searches. And also we had to purchase a lot of data feeds, right? By far. So now we're able to do a lot of that with AI. So we're doing a lot of the research and a lot of the underlying information gathering. And then, we're able to take away a lot more information quicker to then say, okay, how are we going to use this information? Let's fact check it first. And then now let's use it and create content around it. And so we're able to do a lot of that legwork a lot quicker, faster, more efficiently than we had been able to do before, if that makes sense on that side. And then there's some opportunities within imagery, like if we want to find, drone videos or, if we have infrastructure clients, as an example, in private equity, and we want to find specific footage of specific infrastructure types of investments, we can quickly find more drone footage and more imagery and even if it's generative, we could, say we want to have a rail yard or a factory or et cetera. We can get more imagery quicker. Again, we have to make sure that it's not rights managed and that a photographer or somebody else doesn't own the rights to that art, but it can create assets for us that we can use. So creating visual assets and research and some underlying content that is useful for us to then again fact check and use. It's a time saver. I think as AI evolves, we'll see how much it can do in way of like development. So back end development, we do a lot of website development work. So we're excited to see on the back end how much, development work can be done. We have to actually, check it and make sure that it's as sophisticated and secure as what we're doing. But it's an interesting, evaluation and audit that we're doing right now on the back end development side.
And what are your, if I may ask, are you finding that it's actually useful or it's not so useful? At least in its current
definitely been useful. We're more in the let's evaluate and see phase. I believe it's too soon to just use any of that and send it to a client. That's not happening. I don't think that'll ever. I mean, I say never, but I don't foresee in the near future being able to use something direct to client. I see too many issues when we're doing fact checking, hallucinations, coding even, but it's a very good foundational start, right? To save time for individuals so they can be more efficient on what they really need to focus on. And some of that legwork or some of that initial work can be done, but there's a lot of cleanup to be had. But again, it's very early. So I feel very positive about time efficiencies being created over, I'm going to say the next 3 years. I think in 3 years from now, we're going to see exponential growth in what AI can do for companies. And if we adopt it early and see how to utilize it, then I think it's going to be an incredible tool, right? But I don't think it can replace, because then everything is going to become commoditized. At some point, will everything start to look very similar, if you want, So it's a question I don't have.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about that for a second. If the computers are themselves producing content, or the machines are producing content, And human beings are, by their nature, more creative.
Yep.
So it sounds like, A, you're saying that human beings are never going to be out of this mix. Because, God,
I
please.
never say never, but I never say never, but I hope not, obviously. And I believe strongly that they will not, because the human brain has a creative side to it that's the reason why some actors are great and some are not, right? That's creativity. That's the reason why some designers are absolutely brilliant and some are not. It's the reason why, if you ask somebody, that's why artists like Picasso and Andy Warhol and Jackson Pollock are very different, but all beautiful, because all of their artwork is different. If somebody loves Andy Warhol, you're not necessarily going to go buy a Picasso, right? You might, but it's a completely different style of art. So to me, that's the human element there. And as, a creative and technical agency doing both, creative work and also some technical work, I think there's opportunity to use the technology for sure. Absolutely. It's over time, more and more, but I don't think I believe it at some point could commoditize if it was being used holistically, right? Does everything sound the same, feel the same? And I don't mean exactly the same, because you can train it to be somewhat different, but can it be truly creative, right? Again, it's early, so I'd like to, maybe next year we do another session on just the evolution of 2024 and AI and the creative space. But
That would sound great. And then, while we're thinking about that, I wonder if there have been any clients who have engaged you on a similar conversation. Like, what can they gain efficiency-wise in their efforts via AI, maybe specific to marketing or maybe even not?
yeah, I mean, again, I think a lot of research can be done, and there's efficiencies that can be created. I also believe with an AI with some, brand assets. So, I need a LinkedIn piece of art, right? That's very simple for AI to help you create based on a subject matter. So you penned a thought leadership piece and you need a piece of LinkedIn art or a piece of art for your blog. Very helpful, right? As an individual, as a company, not having to outsource that. So that's been helpful, even for ourselves, being able to create, specific art. Again, we want the artwork to be in the style of the client. So we need to feed it that information first, right? If there's a style that the client has, we don't want every single piece of art that they put out to be in a completely different style. And that I see that happening when they don't actually feed it the information of the design style and then keep that style consistently. So there becomes to be a brand bifurcation if people aren't using it well or using it without feeding it, specific instruction on this is the type of style I want. Because then you're going to get different styles all the time. So
as a technologist, I'm going to interrupt you for 2 seconds and ask you to just maybe explain to me and maybe to anyone else who's listening, who's asking about what is in fact the value of having brand consistency.
Oh, it's huge, huge, Morty. So, a brand, first of all, a brand is an experience somebody has with you. I believe Steve Jobs said it, but it's not just a website or a logo or a marketing presentation or a pitch book. It is an entire experience. It's from the day that client says to you or investor, I want to be a part of, your organization. I want to be a limited partner, or a client that says, I want to, work with you. It's an experience. When they walk into your office, when they shake your hand, when they sit in your lobby or your or your conference room, it's the entire experience. When you post something on either a thought leadership piece on either Forbes Council or you post it on your LinkedIn, it's all an experience somebody has with you. That's your entire brand, right? And so you have to have two very, very important points of consistency. You have to have verbal consistency and visual consistency. And that creates an institutional brand across the board, right? It's two main parts of brand, right? Of your brand is the institutional verbal and the institutional visual. And it's the consistency across it. If not, then it looks like a hot mess. And so
Sure, you have some funny stories about the hot mess.
Yeah, we call it a Frankenstein, right? When everything looks like it's Frankenstein together. But it dilutes your institutional brand equity if you don't have verbal and visual consistency. And you want to create an institutional brand equity, right? And you're going to build upon it. And when you don't build upon it in a positive way and things aren't consistent, and then you're detracting from it, so you're losing brand equity. So brand equity is important. Consistency creates brand equity. And institutional brand equity, you have to continue to build that. And that's part of, the consistency visually and verbally you should have.
And that goes back to your fractional leadership where you're creating that roadmap for continuing building into that.
Yes, correct. Right. So for those hours that we can give clients a week, we can maintain that, but not only maintain that, we establish it, build it, and then, create solutions to advance it and then maintain it. Right. And they don't have to really do anything besides provide us with time up front to help, massage and nuance the strategy and, several hours a month to be able to give us weigh in on what we've produced and the solutions we've provided and the success that we've had and the key performance indicators and give us feedback. So it's definitely advantageous for clients, I think.
Cool. And maybe something a little bit on the more whimsical side. You've been doing this for a little while, and, I've been doing this for a little while. Are there any stories of something that you learned that you'd say, yeah, definitely gonna never do that again, or absolutely, I learned a lot and we're gonna do that again, that you would be open to sharing?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that there's many things that I would say I would never do again or do again. I think it's not even just as a business owner, but also just in my career path. But there were times I would say in the last, maybe just more in the last like 8 years, where we've thought about as a business saying, okay, do we want to get into a complementary space? I'll give you an example. So, design firms and marketing communication firms, right? Organically, they do terrible PR. And PR firms do terrible marketing, communication, design, and execution, web, print. I just say that because it's just, I've had 22 years of seeing it. Because what it takes to create a marketing firm is very specific. And what it takes to run and create a PR firm is very specific. And it's an apple and a puppy. So I think that it's, at one point we thought, well, maybe we'll get into more of a communications, service as well. And that doesn't work because again, just to my point, I think there's a very specific silo. If you stick to your specialization and you don't try to bifurcate out of it, then you continue to be an industry leader and a specialist in the space. So I think that trying to diversify your business too much is definitely not advantageous. But for us, I mean, we started to do a lot more digital marketing several years ago, and that was a positive, right? So we added that as a service, like content marketing, brand awareness, brand building, because it's an organic complement to our business as fractional CMO, but also as a marketing, communication, design, and creative firm and technology
Are
firm.
each one of those things like a specific discrete set of tasks? I don't know how to call it anything different, but are those solutions that are offered discreetly the things you just listed? I'd repeat them if I remember them.
Yeah, so I mean, like outside of the core offering, if is that
Yeah.
what you mean? Yeah. So
No, you
yeah,
had said like you had listed a couple of different things, and I was curious if that's just it's a holistic package and everyone thinks of it holistically, or those are discrete things that people purchase, so to speak, on an a la carte basis that you would be.
right. Really, everything we do is very much a la carte. So I think clients, we want to serve the client's needs, and I think that some organizations try to go in and solve all problems. Right? You have to buy the farm. Well, I say, well, you could buy a few of the animals. You don't have to buy the entire farm, right? And I say that in jest and joking because
Yeah.
some clients come to us for one or two specific needs, and sometimes clients come to us for a whole, brand identity and execution on pitch books, websites, brand awareness strategies, and digital marketing. And so the digital marketing definitely was born out of creating more thought leadership pieces and content around helping clients become industry experts in their space in the financial services side through LinkedIn or Twitter, X, whatever the platforms are, your own website as a knowledge center. People go to your
Right.
website and say, I'm going to go to this website because every day, every week, because I know that individual's posting something about the industry that I'm in or I care about, whether it's an investor or somebody that wants to work at the firm, and helping build those portfolio managers or those founders of those firms or those leaders at those institutions as thought leaders and industry experts. So digital marketing kind of came out of that to help them holistically build more of a program around building their brand, because we were doing the creative work on the presentation, pitch book, and website side. So it definitely was born out of it. And it's definitely a la carte, because I think that clients can come to us for a website or a pitch book or a whole marketing communication program, like pitch books, thought leadership pieces, marketing documents, performance reports, and then say, oh, I had no idea that you could do this other service. And so then we help them holistically build upon what we've built initially, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and in the industry that you work in, obviously financial firms are well regulated. Does that impact the world of marketing that you would be?
Oh God, yes. So I always say that I spend every day working with a compliance hat on. So,
Me too.
which is absolutely true. Maybe it's my hair, but I wear a compliance hat every day, as does
No
everyone
hair.
on our team. Yeah. I'll share mine with you, but we have to work within a compliance framework every day. There's not one part of my day where I'm not thinking like within a compliance framework. Every word that we write and every piece of material that we produce has to work within the regulations and the marketing rules that are set by the SEC, by FINRA, wherever our clients are regulated and if they're registered. So we have to operate within those parameters, with those guardrails. And our job is to be creative within those guardrails. And knowing what to say and what you cannot say is instrumental. Our websites, we have to be able to, understand, not within like I guess it's like this. Within 100%, you can or cannot say this to the public. And with our presentations, we have to understand how to disclaim performance, and also how to. And we obviously work with outside compliance for the funds, and also their GCs internally, right? Because at the end of the day, we're not lawyers, but we work with a compliance hat on, so we understand you cannot say this, you can say this. We can show performance like this, but we have to actually make sure past performance is being used in a certain manner. Like fees need to be the same from fund 1 to fund 2 if you're using it as
Past
past
performance
performance,
is
right?
not an indication of future results. I've heard that
Not
once or twice before.
probably a million, but yeah, absolutely, you're right.
It's not just
I
in
love that. And
finance.
I
I
finally
mean,
get tattooed on my neck, that phrase. So, but you're right. We have to operate within a compliance framework every day.
yeah, in our world, it's also similar because in that sense, anything that's happening from a technology perspective, including archiving, communication, and things like that, need to happen with a compliance eye
Yeah,
as well. And clearly,
for
it's
sure. Oh,
clear that
absolutely.
you would be
No, for sure. For you, for sure, Morty. I'm curious too. Like when you have to operate too with clients, there's definitely a compliance framework that I'm sure that you have to, be very sensitive and aware to from a technology perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And the regulatory firms the regulatory agencies, whether that be, the SEC or FINRA or, New York State DFS, in my case, are regulatory bodies that we are familiar with how they look at the technology and how they look at the size of the company, because they're, a company that is smaller does not have the same onerous requirements that, say, JP Morgan would. So different companies have their own sets of setups so they can properly be not fed, but more like built properly in order for their current needs to make sense for their growth in their business.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make sense. And yeah, I think that, when you're selling sneakers, there's obviously different challenges, but when you're working in investment management, as you know, there's certain things that have to be specifically addressed, adhered to, and taken into consideration to be successful. And I think that is why when you become sort of specialist in an industry, and we talked about, an industry, a target audience, a target marketplace, to really be able to understand, not just like, oh, this is the client, this is their needs, but from a regulatory perspective, what can and cannot they do? I've seen a lot of, funds, get websites done, and then, SEC fines them because they said something
Really?
they were not supposed to. Of course, because those, some firms just don't understand how to operate within a compliance framework, right? So, but it's really important, especially for you too. I think that when you
Yeah, of
become
course.
in
Of
the
course.
space,
Yeah, working with the compliance consultancies and, as you mentioned, the attorneys is it's an interesting journey because, at least in my world, it's always changing, and I'd imagine in your world as well.
Yes, absolutely. Just last year, on November 4th, the SEC updated their marketing rules, right, for private funds. So, hedge funds, private equity, there was an evolution in what we can and cannot say. And the changes weren't like wholesale major, but they were important enough to know them and significant enough to be able to say to clients, okay, you did this before, but that's not working now, right? So if you're still using that information, we need to change it, right?
Does
And
the law
knowing that,
grandfather in does the law grandfather in some of that communication or not really? And I know you're
no,
not a
no,
lawyer. So
yeah. I'm not a lawyer, right? Caveat, footnote that. But I believe, from my understanding, no, you'd have to make updates to your marketing material, respectively, to reflect the new changes in the SEC.
is there a time frame within this needs to happen, or it's like pretty much, oh, the new guideline comes out and it needs to be immediate? Meaning, like in my
There
world,
was
there's
a runway
generally a little
last
bit of time.
year. Yeah, there was a runway last year, but that runway's passed, correct. But they did give a runway, correct. They made the announcement they were changing the rules, then they changed the rules and they set them out, and then they did give guidelines onto deadlines on when they would like to see all of those updates applied. So for us, if a client comes to us and says, we need you to audit this and tell us if we've made these changes respectively correctly, we'll audit it from a marketing mindset lens, and then we'll work with their compliance or our outside compliance to make sure it's completely 100% signed off on. So it's a dual effort from a marketing side and a compliance side.
It's really cool. I think our businesses service a very similar demographic, and therefore so many of the challenges are similar and yet completely different exactly at the same time.
I agree,
It's
Mordy. It's a very, very, very similar overlapping services for sure.
yeah, and I
How
definitely
is it?
want
How
to
do you
thank
feel like technology has evolved or going to evolve? With or without the obviously integration of AI. But how do you feel that your business is going to evolve over the next let's call it 1 to 3 years, or how it has evolved in recent years?
I mean, look, again, past performance is no indication of future results, right? So I'd go in, let's just look back for where the technology is. I know that we started this company in 1998, so that was a long, long time ago. And we're right now on KJ probably 8 or 9.0, if you will, which is interesting in terms of having evolved the company. And I tell the young people in my firm all the time, the technology generation is about 18 months. So if you're not paying attention and educating yourself and working between your ears to ensure that you are expanding yourself, then you will become irrelevant, probably not in one generation, but in two. So, you know,
Yeah,
well, think about,
I love that.
and
18
then,
months. It's a
and
great,
then,
that's a
yeah,
great tool
and
for
then,
people to use.
oh, for sure. And then what's interesting is also then an event will happen. An event will happen that will drastically change the way people interact. So, in the most recent memory, that was COVID. Prior to COVID, and I'm proud to say that almost all of our clients, yeah, maybe even all of our clients, had the flexibility of just pretty much picking up their laptops, going home, and working from home. But many clients or many people did not have such luxury, and they were not cloud oriented from 7 and 10 years ago. They had servers in the office that needed to be maintained and systems and so on. So um, that fundamentally shifted the interaction that occurs now over a video conference, which we can now record and turn into a podcast, which is really lovely. And on top of that, people became much more comfortable in having these kinds of meetings. And then now the flip
Yeah,
side happens. Okay, so what happens now? Everyone's working remotely, but people recognize the fact that, especially again for the younger folk, they don't have the ability to tap somebody on the shoulder and say, "Hey, how do I do that?" They need to
really
schedule the
important. Yeah.
meeting in order to
Mhm.
show them how to. There's a lot less learning that happens organically when people are not in the same place. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens both because the technology is evolving quickly and in terms of how to manage the people that are in the technology space.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that that's a challenge that we're going to see evolve, right? We're only a few years out of COVID, right? Where a lot of remote work, but a lot of people are back to the office too. So I think
Sure.
it's an interesting, but you said like there's a learning curve, right? That every young person has to, go through. And is
Well,
that,
you said, but I just
yeah,
repeated
is
that.
that, yeah. And it's interesting if that timeline will take longer if there's more remote work, right?
I think it will. I think it will. In other words, it provides a certain amount of focus, but the ad hoc, quick bursts of learning are just going to happen differently. And I don't know how that happens. One of the things that we had suggested, and I never really took off, but the idea of having a Zoom or Teams room that was open all day and people could just
Yes.
show up there.
Mordy, I so agree with that. It's so funny you said that. I was at a conference in Arizona a few weeks ago, an alternative asset management conference for service providers only. It was an amazing event, and it was about 60 service providers that get together every year, and we have a forum, and we sit around a very enormous, large square table. I mean, it fits 60 of us. That's how large it is. And we talk about the challenges of just the industry, right, as a service provider. And one of them that came up was remote work. And of course, I love that what you just said about the open Zoom. A couple of the service providers said that they're looking into having this open Zoom, which means people would be at their desk. You could see what they're doing, and you could say, "Hey, Beth, I have a question. I'm just going to give you a call," right? But you could see everybody. It feels like at least you're in the same environment. I won't say room because it's an environment, right? But I feel like it's unbelievable that you said that, because I feel like it's going to be something that people are definitely going, as a business owner, I would love to adopt. Does that make sense?
I completely understand and completely agree. So, these are the things which technology changes. Sometimes we don't even notice. And sometimes we only notice when we look in hindsight. So these are the kinds of things that I love talking, and I thank you, Lauren. I think we're coming up on the hour, and I want to very much thank you. I learned a lot about marketing, and I appreciate the wisdom that you've shared and how you've come about to focusing on the financial services industry, how you've developed your marketing firm as well as your fractional abilities, and the way you think about fostering growth and creativity for your clients and your team members. So I very much appreciate that.